Verse 10 says, "And when he had come into Jerusalem, all the city was moved, saying, 'Who is this?'" Remember, there's many people from out of town who've traveled there. So they don't know who Jesus is. And so the multitude said, "Well, this is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth of Galilee." It says all the city was moved. There's 2 to 3 million people there. The word moved here, it means to be shaken. Elsewhere, the word is used to describe an earthquake. Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey as king, it shook the whole city like an earthquake. We could use some shaking right now by Jesus, couldn't we? Well, it'd be nice if he did that again. Well, then Jesus went into the temple of God, and he drove out all those who bought and sold in the temple and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer." It's his house. "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." Now, this is actually the second time that Jesus cleansed the temple. The first time is recorded in John chapter 2. It was at the first Passover of his public ministry. Now he cleanses the temple again at the last Passover of his public ministry. So Jesus opened and closed his ministry by cleansing God's house. Now, those who bought and sold in the temple and the money changers that worked in the temple, they all worked for Annas the high priest. Annas the high priest, this is his system that he has set up and is profiting from. So Jesus is interfering with the high priest's business and cutting into his profits here. And what would happen was a person who traveled from a long distance to Jerusalem to celebrate one of the feasts like Passover, to worship God or to buy something in the temple, buy a sacrifice or to make an offering, they couldn't use foreign currency. They had to exchange their money for temple shekels. And so that's why they have money changers there. They had exchanged their foreign currency for a temple shekel, and the money exchangers gouged the people on the exchange rate. But the people had no choice. If you want to make an offering to the Lord, you've traveled all this way. What else are you going to do? You're just going to get gouged. And then they would need to buy an animal for sacrifice. And again, those who bought and sold animals for sacrifice, they took advantage of the worshipers and charged them excessive prices. But again, what else are you going to do? And so they were just ripping people off. Even ripping off people who bought doves. Do you see that here in the verses? The end of verse 12, those who sold doves. Those who bought doves for sacrifice were the poorest people. All they could afford was a dove. So they're even gouging the poorest people. There's no mercy, no compassion here. It's just a rigged system. They're taking advantage of these people that are coming to genuinely seek God and worship God, and they're just capitalizing on that. And so this whole experience of going to the temple, it left a bad taste in the mouth of the worshipers who came to worship God, as you can imagine. If you get ripped off every time you come to church, it's not really going to put you in the mood to worship God, is it? I mean, I don't really feel like singing right now, right? I'm angry. In addition to that, during the feasts, like Passover, because there were so many more people coming to Jerusalem and coming to the temple, the religious leaders under Annas the high priest, the guy who's in charge, they actually set up this market in the court of the Gentiles. The court of the Gentiles was built for foreigners who wanted to worship the true and living God, Yahweh. So, non-believers who come, they've heard about the God of Israel. They've heard about the true and living God. They want to worship Him. And so in the temple, there was the court of the Gentiles, but the high priest didn't care about foreigners. And so he put all the shopkeepers and money changers in the court of the Gentiles during Passover, leaving the Gentiles with no place to worship in the temple. Again, imagine you're a Gentile. You've traveled maybe hundreds of miles. It's taken you weeks to get there because you've heard about the God of Israel. And you get there, and there's no place for you to worship in the temple because they've got this marketplace set up. It was impossible for you to enter the temple. The place of prayer had become a marketplace. And this made Jesus angry. This made Jesus angry. Jesus had righteous anger. Jesus gets angry when God is misrepresented by people. Jesus gets angry when people who are seeking God are manipulated or taken advantage of by religious conmen. Jesus gets angry when people seeking God are prevented from coming to God and worshiping Him. Jesus came into this world to save people by dying on the cross for them, to make a way for people to come to God and have a relationship with Him. And Jesus doesn't like anyone interfering with people coming to God and worshiping Him. And so Jesus cleansed the temple of all this corruption. He drove out all who bought and sold in the temple. Notice overturning the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. Notice he turned over the seats of those who sold doves. He didn't turn over the tables and potentially injure the birds that were in cages on the table. So Jesus was angry, but he wasn't like out of control raging here. He still had self-control even when he was angry. Now, Mark's account says he also stopped everyone from carrying anything through the temple. People used the temple as a shortcut to get from one side of the city to the other. Instead of going around the temple complex, they would just cut through. They had no reverence for the house of God, no fear of God, and Jesus put a stop to it. Jesus told people, you can't use the temple as a shortcut anymore.